Hi there, and welcome to Off the Data Provided, an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we are going to get into a new viral video by Sabrina Breyer. She is an internet or online comedian who oftentimes makes funny, satirical videos around interpersonal relationships. This video that she has that has gone viral is around the quote-unquote social savvy friend. I haven't seen a video of hers go viral like this in quite a bit, so I thought it was worth our time on the podcast. I've been sent the video over a dozen times by people. I've responded somewhat about it on social media as well as in my DMs, but I thought this would be a great space to further explore it and parse out where she's coming from and look at some of the quote-unquote division that the video is causing. I also just want to apologize for being a week late with the episode. Dr. Shepard was teaching a summer course multiple summer courses, and that ended last week. And in the rigmarole of submitting grades and doing all that, I forgot to record and upload an episode. So you'll get a double dose of me this week as well as next week because we do the first and third Wednesdays of the month. Also, if you would like to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. I won't be doing one this week since we'll be having one next week, but definitely feel free to submit those if you are interested. So, to delve into the actual video, just to give you a brief overview, if you haven't seen it, I will attach the link to the video in the description of this podcast. But if you haven't seen the video, essentially what happens is Sabrina is leaving drinks with a friend, and the friend asks if they should split a ride home. Sabrina then shares that no, she's not going home. She's actually going to dinner with two other friends. That friend is like, oh, well, I love them too. Can I tag along? And Sabrina says no. She says that, you need to lock in more with them. You've missed several events. One was a birthday dinner, which the friend had a quote unquote valid excuse of going to a funeral. I don't think anybody would think that's not a valid excuse. But then she also brings up a one-woman show that one of the other people did that she didn't attend to and says, she's got to lock in. The friend rebuts and says that she's been liking a lot of their social media posts. And Sabrina then counters saying, well, are you swiping up? Are you doing more than liking and commenting, building off a conversation from that? And the friend, of course, is like, no. And Sabrina then pushes her to quote unquote lock in, to invest more. One of those key friendship formula words that we've talked about before on the podcast, right? Investment is super important. And that is in essence where the skit ends. Sabrina leaves to go to her dinner, and I assume the friend goes home. So this video has blown up in the past week. I believe it was posted on August 17th or August 18th. And since then, there's been so much discourse around the video. Some people on the side of Sabrina and saying, yep, that's right, that makes sense. Other people saying, this isn't right, you're making relationships transactional. And so people have, of course, come to me to ask for my opinions, ask my thoughts. I shared a short little thread on Twitter about it regarding my own life, essentially bringing up investment, of course, as we've talked about. But I think there's a lot to pick up and learn from this video. So as I mentioned before, investment is one of those key friendship formula ingredients that we have discussed multiple times on the podcast. Investment is what you put into a friendship. It is the time. It is the energy. It is resources, financially, emotionally, mentally. It's your actual being, commuting, going to things. It's what you put in. It's the raw materials that help build a friendship. As we have mentioned before, there are, of course, other ingredients. There is trust, there is emotional closeness, and there is support. And all of that builds out of investment. You can't get emotionally close to someone if you're not investing in the relationship, if you're not being active. You cannot have support if you are not investing in the relationship. And you can't build trust either if you are not investing in the relationship. So for me, the Sabrina video was underlying investment. And to be quite frank, the lack of investment that a lot of people put towards their friendships. We've mentioned this multiple times on the podcast before, but I think this truly underscores what is happening with a lot of people. I see constantly on social media that people are struggling to make friends in adulthood, that it's hard to do so, so on and so forth. And I somewhat laugh at that. I know that might sound harsh, but I'm someone who has moved over 7 times in his life. And I have oftentimes moved to locations where I knew nobody, but I have never struggled to make meaningful or long-term friendships. And the main reason why is I invest. I remember things. I support people, whether it's from up close or afar. If you tell me something, and we live in the age of our smartphones, I will write it down. I will set a reminder if it's something that maybe is not top of mind to send you a quick text message. Oh, I know you're going to do X today. Sorry, I can't go, but I wish you all the best. Let's debrief afterwards. And then I'll follow up a few days later to see if they're willing or able to debrief. So even though I didn't make it to, let's say, the show, we still are able to talk about it. I'm still able to be somewhat present. Where this lack of investment really stems from, I think, is this narrative that has been going around, especially on social media, since the pandemic kind of began, right? We're still in the ongoing pandemic, but this idea that you don't owe anybody anything. And if you believe that, and if that's your mantra, and that's how you move through life, then of course you're going to lack community. You're going to lack close friends because you feel as if you don't owe them anything. And community and close ties and friendship, you do owe people. You owe them investment. You owe them an explanation. You owe them things. But if you are walking through this world thinking as if you don't owe anybody anything, then of course you're eventually going to find yourself in a lonelier position. If you continually rebuff people's invites, the invites will stop coming. If you continue to show up to people's events that they're hosting empty-handed or not even asking before you come if there's anything you can bring or help up with, those invites might slowly start to dwindle. I know here, personally in Philadelphia, with the ongoing pandemic, I was hosting a lot of events at my house, grilling or cooking meals, inviting people over. And I eventually got overwhelmed because the majority of people who would come would never ask if they could bring anything or if they could give me some money to offset the cost of hosting not just a small gathering of 1 or 2 people, but oftentimes I would be hosting 5 to 8 to 10 people. And so, of course, being COVID aware that we are in an ongoing pandemic, I've been seeing actually news reports from CNN, Fox, NBC reporting on the COVID pandemic and another rising wave, which is somewhat of a shocker to see 6 years in, where people like to act as if it's not happening, but it is. I also was providing free tests, and those tests cost money. So the fact that I'm providing free tests to make sure that I'm safe as well as my guests are safe, I'm providing food, I'm providing drinks, I'm providing space I then have to clean up, I eventually got exhausted doing that. So now I don't host as much, or I really don't invite certain people as often because they're not stepping up. And so, of course, being ethical and effective, is this something I should bring up to people? Maybe, maybe not. We know that things are nuanced, but there are some people who I brought it up to. I said, hey, I feel as if I'm always inviting you to things and you don't ever invite me to things. What's going on there? And sometimes the person's like, oh, well, I know you wouldn't like to do this, or I thought you wouldn't like to do that, so I just didn't invite you. And I'm like, well, allow me to make that decision. Or, oh, well, we know you take COVID very seriously, and so we well, I'm always masked. I would have protected myself. So clearly, sometimes it's worth having the conversation, and other times, maybe it's not. And I think you have to be the judge of your situation. As we've talked about before, communication is always context, content, and communicator specific. So what might work with one friend or one instance might not work with another. But in my own life, as I shared on Twitter briefly, especially with COVID still ongoing, with me doing the majority of the investments, aka creating the spaces for these friendships to foster and to grow. When I pulled back, some of those friendships faltered. Some of these people I haven't seen in almost a year because I haven't really hosted anything. And that to me showed me that our friendship was unequal because oftentimes, it's really easy to be in any type of interpersonal relationship when the other person is doing the majority of the investment, when they are doing the lion's share of the day-to-day work. And what I found as I have matured and as I have started to change how I go about investing, sometimes I pull back just to see what happens. And unfortunately, I'd say 9 times out of 10, the relationship slowly but surely just starts to dissipate. It starts to change in ways where we aren't as close, where we don't see each other as much anymore because I'm not actively investing. And so for me, or not, I'm still actively investing, but I'm not actively investing to the degree that I was. Let's say it was 80-20, and maybe I drop back to 50 and see if they pick up the slack. And they don't. And then it just deteriorates further. I've talked about that before on the podcast with one friend where they got into a relationship. They didn't have really any time for me. I was like, that's fine. I baked them birthday cookies. They said they were going to come get them. They never came. I started eating them. I froze them, of course, started eating them. By the time they were gone, the friend had reached out to me months later, not about even the cookies or anything, but about a connect I had. And I, of course, provided that to the person, and that was kind of the last time we talked. Another discourse that I've seen around this video is people talking about how people treat relationships as transactional. And I think what's important to underscore here is relationships by definition are transactional. It's not a bad thing. It's not a dirty word or concept when it comes to interpersonal relationships. Any interpersonal relationship is transactional. You are putting something in and you're hoping to get something out. You're looking for an ROI, a return on investment. We even think about child-parent. That is a transactional relationship. And it's an unequal transactional relationship, usually for the duration of that relationship, but it still is transactional. A parent brings you into this world. Ideally, they're providing love, support, shelter, food, a place for you to grow, to mature, to realize. And in return, a child hopefully is providing love back to the parent, is maybe pushing that parent. And then when the child grows up into adulthood, hopefully there's a shift in their relationship. I know, as I've talked about before on this podcast, there's definitely been a tremendous shift in my relationship with my parent where I'm one of their little friends and they're one of my little friends. Whenever I host anything, and if they're in town, they always have a standing invite. We love going to movies. We're all in the A-list club, so we will go to movies together. I'm literally seeing 2 movies this week with my parents alone. And so there's been a shift where we're friends. And sure, my parents still pay for the majority of things. I pay for things every now and then, but they come to my house and I cook dinner for them, or I'll go over to their house and bring things for them. And so, sure, is it equally transactional? Probably not. Have I invested as much as they have? Probably not. But when you're in interpersonal relationships, the investment, people aren't usually going tit for tat. So I speak about my long-term friendships, right? I've talked about Kiera. I've talked about Janine. I've talked about Jaime. I've talked about Zamir. I've talked about Darius. These are relationships I've had for well over a decade plus. And with every relationship, I'm not keeping tit for tat. Did I pay for this? So are they going to pay for this next time? No. In the lifetime of our friendship, they've covered me in certain situations. I've covered them, or they've come to visit me and I've come to visit them. I'm not keeping score on how many times one person has come or how many times I've gone to them. doesn't matter. What matters is, are we investing in what works? So I know that one time Kiera talked to me because she oftentimes comes to Philly more than I go to visit her in Boston. And we had a really good conversation around that. One of the reasons I don't go to Boston a lot is I don't like the city. So sure, it's fun to see her, but during a point, she didn't really even have a space for me to stay where I have a guest room she can stay. So logistically, it's easier. Also, she's from this area. So when she comes to visit me, she's just not seeing me. She's also seeing family and other friends. And so it's easier. But we remedied that. We fixed that. I went up and I visited her, and we have plans for me to see her again. But we had that conversation around the investment. So maybe she felt she was coming to see me a little more than I was her. And we talked about it and we really broke it down. Well, why is that? And maybe why is it easier? And so those other logistic things came into play, and there was no hard feelings, and we figured it out. Also, as I've talked about before with COVID, all of my closest friends, who I've mentioned by name now, they take COVID more seriously when I am in the picture. So if they're coming to visit me, they know they're going to have to take a test. Kiara is always great. I say A+ level with this, where she will have already tested before, but knowing me, she's like, I know you're going to make me test again, but I literally tested this morning. I'm like, that's great. You're still going to test at my house, right? So she understands that, part of the emotional closeness, part of the investment is taking COVID a little more serious when you're around me, because I am immunocompromised. And so I am taking it seriously. I'm not trying to get it. And so part of showing that support, part of building that trust is doing those things. Even Janine, when I come to visit her in Memphis, she takes it a little more seriously. These are things that help build and strengthen a friendship. We know from how we have discussed friendships throughout this podcast that friendships ebb and flow. Sometimes there are seasons where you're super close with someone, and maybe there are seasons where you're not as close. But you can always remedy that by reinvesting. So Jaime is a great example of this for me. He lives in Los Angeles. I live, of course, in Philadelphia. So time zone makes it more difficult to talk, but we still make space and time for one another. Even though we don't talk as frequently, we built a very solid foundation when I did live in Los Angeles. As I've shared before, we probably saw each other 3 to 5 times a week, almost for the course of 5 years. And so there's a lot built. There's a strong foundation. So even though now we go months without speaking, if he sends me a text asking for my opinion or thoughts, I immediately respond. The same with him. If he calls me randomly, I always pick up. Or if I can't pick up, I respond right away and let him know, and we figure out a time to talk. This is really going to be important. You have to put into these relationships if you want them to grow. And something I know that I struggled with, especially in my late 20s, maybe early 30s, was investing. So I'm someone where friendships, I think, are great. I think they're super important. I think they're an interpersonal relation that people oftentimes overlook. We oftentimes focus more so on familial and romantic relationships, of coworkers as well, and friends sometimes get lost in the sauce. There, as we know from different studies, are usually the first interpersonal relationship that gets left behind if there are stressors in your life. If you're going through things with your family, a romantic relationship, or the job is getting really tough, friends are kind of what you leave behind and expect them to just be sitting and waiting for you. And I know I went viral, as we shared before. I shared a text message exchange with someone that I thought I was building a friendship with, that they kind of ghosted me for several weeks and then reached out to me asking if I could provide them with emotional support and words of wisdom, because I'm always great for that. And I responded in kind, go and ask the people that you've been very present and with for the last 3.5, 4 weeks, because you weren't present with me. I literally had asked you a question and 3.5 weeks go by and you didn't respond to the question, but now you're asking for me to provide something for you. Mind you, we had only known each other for 7 weeks. So for more than half of the time that we were trying to build a relationship, you haven't been around. that's not going to go over well. But that, of course, blew up because some people were like, oh, that was rude of you. But there's nuance, there's context. And I use the, hashtag fat friend, but that is a trope that exists where someone is just supposed to be there to support you, to help you, and you don't pour back into them. And I think the fat friend trope, though Sabrina is clearly not getting into any of that, underscores aspects of desirability and how we oftentimes treat people based on how they fall into that spectrum. So I know I've been the fat friend, or people have tried to make me the fat friend. And that is something that, unfortunately, when I was younger, I accepted. I accepted the crumbs or the scraps, but it is not something I accept now, nor have accepted over the past half or so decade. I would say probably longer, since about my 30s. It's not something I tolerate. And so a lot of relationships have ended for me because that is what people expected. And when I demanded and requested and required that they also invest, that they also show up, they weren't able to. I believe I shared a story about this before. I won't say the person's name, but we had a pretty close friendship for several years. I want to say almost half a decade. And the friendship fell off because he got into a relationship. He really wasn't there anymore. And I said, cool, that is what it is. And he even forgot my birthday. That is a huge no, especially if you're a close friend. And he was a close friend. He only knew it was my birthday because a mutual friend of ours, I believe, told him. And he reached out and said something to me and wanted to reconnect. And I said, sure, let's go on the phone. Let's talk. And when we talked, I said, hey, I feel like I've been investing in more of our relationship than you have. And he agreed. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. If you want to build a relationship back with me, you're going to have to do more investing. And to be honest with me, to show me that you care, you're going to have to invest more than me. I said, I felt like maybe we were 70-30, 60-40. I said, what it's going to be, at least for the first few months, is it's probably going to be 40% me, 60% you. I'm always going to respond. I'm always going to engage, but I'm not going to be the active planning maker that I was, because it's clear that you took advantage of that and you left me high and dry. And he said, oh, I totally understand. I'm going to commit to that. I'm down for that. And I said, no. Take a few days and then reach back out to me and let's talk and let's figure out what that looks like. And he said, great. I never heard from him again. And that is okay. We know that sometimes we have friendships for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I think when you mature in adulthood, you're better able to suss those relationships out. So the 5 names I named, those are my lifetime friends. We ebb and flow in terms of frequency of communication with all of them, just based on demands and stressors. But we've reached a benchmark where these people are basically stuck with me unless they commit a horrific sin. And I don't even know what that could be. I mean, maybe they kill somebody. I don't know. But outside of that, then I have friends who are maybe for a season or a reason. And I'm not upset when those friendships maybe wane a bit, or if they kind of fall off. I understand that I don't have enough bandwidth to have all these lifetime friends. I think when we are more naive, when we are children, we're kind of taught that friends do X, Y, and Z. If someone doesn't do X, Y, and Z, they're not your friend. And as you grow mature, you realize that any healthy friendship is whatever those 2 friends agree upon. And it's important to have that meta communication. As I've discussed before, Janine and I model great behavior when it comes to friendship check-ins, where every year or 2 years we check in with each other and say, how have I been showing up? How have I not been showing up? How can I improve? And that has really helped strengthen our relationships through multiple moves, through different jobs, through changes in our lives. And this is what I think is really important to take from Sabrina's video, is it's important to invest. And if you feel as if you are feeling a bit of distance between you and your friend, to bring that up and to push for something. If you don't, the distance is only going to grow further and further until you don't have a relationship anymore, until you're maybe more so an amien, as we've discussed, a concept I coined back in 2018, which looks at a more passive platonic relationship. Friendship is active. Investment is active. It's just not watching stories. It's just not liking things. It's commenting. It is swiping up, as she says. It is getting offline with them. It is planning things. It is, if you cancel the plans, you figuring out the next plans. I had a friend plan something because we hadn't seen each other in a while, and something came up last minute for the friend. I totally get it. The friend tried to counter with dates to work, and because I'm in this really strange limbo right before the semester, I'm semester planning, the dates that the friend offered, I said probably won't work for me. So that's going to be a no. Now we'll see if that friend reaches out again to solidify some newer dates. Hopefully they will. If they don't, it's also no harm, no foul, because I could also do that work as well, if/when I want to. But friendship is active on both parts. But a lot of people get comfortable, as Sabrina underscores in this video, of kind of being that passive friend that just shows up, that when it's convenient for them, they'll do things. And friendship sometimes is also built on inconvenience. I do things, I go to things sometimes when I don't want to. A friend had an event recently and I wasn't really feeling it. I was really, really tired. But I said, you know what? I'm going to show up anyway because I want to support my friend. I want them to know that I care. And I did. And it meant a lot to that friend. So sometimes we have to get out of our own comfort zones. We have to put ourselves out there. But that has to be done on both parts. And so I know, as I've shared, as someone who takes COVID seriously, I have had a shift in my more local friend group somewhat because I've decided not to host events as frequently because the burden, especially the financial burden of providing these tests, is kind of been taken for granted by people. And of course, some people will say, oh, well, then just don't test them. Well, now I'm putting my health at risk to hang out with these people. Doesn't make much sense for me. But what I do is, if there are things going on that are outside, I'm always inviting people because I'll be masked. It's outside. The ability, the likelihood to catch COVID is lessened in those situations. But I think it's really where you come down, right? I'm in a position where I have an overflow of friends. I'm never at a loss to speak to people. I shared on my social media this past weekend how I was literally on the phone with 5 different people for over 2 hours each. One of those phone calls was over 4 hours. And I shared, the reason I'm not really outside is the party always comes to me. And it does. I have built really solid friendships where people show up for me and will put themselves in positions that maybe they don't love. So I even know some friends, they'll start to mask a little more when we hang out. They don't love it, but they realize that it's important to me. So they're willing to make that sacrifice. And because they're willing to make that sacrifice, I'm willing to do other things for them as well. Friendships are give and take. I don't think they're tit for tat, as a lot of people like to talk about with transactions, but every relationship is inherently transactional. You have to put something in for that relationship to grow. And if you're not putting something in, then the other party is probably putting way more in. And eventually they are going to get tired of doing that. And when they get tired of doing that, your relationship is probably going to deteriorate in some way, whether it's the frequency in which you see or communicate with them, whether it is the depth or level of emotional closeness that you have with those people, it just will shift. Nobody wants to always be the gardener, always pouring in to the flower. You can't also always be the flower, always getting poured into. So I think for me, that shows more of a nuance to the conversation. I do think people that are getting upset about the video are probably the friends that are guilty of not really investing and are getting slowly but surely removed from the friend group because of it. I know, for instance, I've hung out with some friends more recently, and then they have plans outside of me afterwards, and I never get upset about that because also, as we know, friendship dynamics change based on who is in the room. So I won't name one of my closest friends, but he does not like to be around certain people that are in my overall friend group. So he's oftentimes like, if they're there, I probably won't come. Or if they are there, I'm probably not going to engage in the way that I typically do. And I respect and I understand that. And so I always give him a heads up if somebody who's coming, right? Who's all going to be there, right? The famous question that people ask. I always let him know first who's going to be there, and I let him determine. Maybe he gets there early and leaves early. Maybe he arrives late and stays after people leave. But we know that dynamics of friends also change. So, okay, me and 3 friends are hanging out. It's going to be different than me and 1 friend is hanging out, or me and the other friend is hanging out. And that's okay. And sometimes maybe they just don't want to hang out with you. It doesn't mean that they're not your friend. It just means that they want to have that moment or that time together, or they have some bonds or some similar interests that they share that you don't share with them. I think you have to realize that it is okay to not always be invited to everything. It is also okay to put yourself out there and just invite those people. You don't always have to wait for an invite. And if you're always waiting for an invite, it also already shows that there's an imbalance in your investment. I have someone who I'm friendly with here who the only time I really see him is when I invite him to things. He hosts things, but I never get an invite. And that's okay, but it also shows me that we're not as close as maybe I wanted us to be at a point. But also, I now know that we're more just hanging out friends, and our relationship isn't going to expand beyond that. We also have depths and levels to friendships, and that's also okay. Just going back to the reason, season, or lifetime friends, it also doesn't mean that a friendship isn't important. Those reason and season friends are just as important as those lifetime friends. It just means that they aren't going to move with you throughout the entirety of your life, how you are expanding. It doesn't mean that their impact isn't as important. Sometimes it might be even more important. It might show you something. It might shift how you view something. It might move how you operate moving forward. But we shouldn't hold people to the same standards that we hold everybody to. We should hold individual friendships to individual standards. And if we feel as if we are seeing distance between a friend, call it out, bring it up, and ask what's going on. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't even have anything to do with you. Sometimes they just have competing demands. That's one of the biggest reasons why friendships oftentimes deteriorate. It's just competing demands, whether it's family, other friends, romantically, work, their own well-being. They might be going through a mental health issue. So it's important to remove your ego, to remove yourself sometimes, and to just have that talk, to have that friendship check-in, to figure out, okay, maybe I need to step up. Be self-reflexive. A lot of times people aren't self-reflexive on how they have been showing up, or quite frankly, how they haven't been showing up. And that really is the start of where it comes from. So those are my musings on the Sabrina video. I believe, as I've always shared, that friendships are extremely important. They are vital relationships. They are also relationships that aren't run by any formal rules or institutions. So I think about family relationships. There's a Department of Family Services that kind of have guidelines about how you should be treating people in your family. We think about committed romantic relationships. We know that there are some guidelines and rules, especially if you decide to get married, you're entering into an institution, and there are services around that. But there really aren't anything around friends, right? You can go to, I guess, couples counseling for friends if you're having issues, but oftentimes people will look at you crazy, like, why would you do that? But I do think friendships are worthy and deserving of that if they really mean something to you. But we as a society kind of treat friends as an afterthought, but then get upset when our friends don't include us in what they're doing. But if you treat someone as an afterthought, eventually they're probably going to treat you as one as well. So that is all I have for today. As always, if you haven't asked Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. And I will see you all next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.